They don't panic when the crowd wakes up. They panic when the one person they couldn't break finally stops bowing. My dear chosen ones, let's call this what it is. This video is the message they'd rather take to the grave than see land in your hands. They'd sooner go down with their whole fake empire than let these words reach your ears. Why? Because you, not the system, are the ticking time bomb. The moment this truth touches your mind, their time starts running out. You were never the glitch. You were always the upgrade they couldn't control. Right now, they're counting on you scrolling past. They're banking on your doubt. This can't be about me. I'm not that important. I've just had a rough life. That's exactly what they want you to believe. They want you to label your war as bad luck, so you never realize you've been a threat from the start. Chosen one, let's be brutally honest. How many normal people get hit over and over, betrayed, drained, sabotaged, and somehow still manage to rise from the ashes every time? That's not a coincidence. That's targeting. Picture this. A wolf is raised on a leash like a house pet. It's fed at certain hours, praised when it sits quietly, punished when it growls over time. Everyone forgets it was ever a predator. They put sweaters on it, teach it tricks, laugh at its obedience. But tell me, what happens the day that leash snaps and the wolf remembers what teeth were actually made for? That's you, my dear chosen one. They dressed you up in doubt, wrapped you in guilt, tried to train you into something tame and predictable, but the instinct inside you, that was never theirs to own. They didn't fear your anger, they feared your clarity. They didn't fear you breaking down, they feared you finally connecting the dots. You might be asking, if I'm so powerful, why did I feel so helpless for so long? Why did everything seem stacked against me? Because this was never a fair fight. They didn't wait for you to grow strong. They moved early. They set traps in your childhood. They weaponized your insecurities. They used people you loved as mirrors to throw your worst fears back at you. Fake friends that drained you. Partners that shattered you. Jobs that bled you dry. Opportunities that evaporated the moment you got close. It wasn't random chaos, it was quiet control. They never wanted you to heal, because healing meant you'd start asking the right questions. Why did they hit me so hard if I was never a threat? Why did they invest so much energy into breaking someone who was supposedly ordinary? And once you start asking those questions, their mask starts slipping. Here's a hard truth they can't stand. Systems don't waste resources on the irrelevant. You don't spend time caging something harmless. You don't build walls around a dull flame. You build prisons for what you fear. And chosen one, whether you see it or not yet, your mind, your presence, your refusal to fully die inside, that's what's had them shaking in back rooms you'll never see. Before we move forward, my dear chosen ones, I need you to understand something clearly. Messages like this don't spread accidentally. They spread because people like you refuse to let them die in silence. If this message is hitting your spirit, if something inside you is waking up, then help us keep this movement alive. All it takes is a like, a share, and a subscription to strengthen this mission and help us reach every soul that's still trapped in silence. Your support isn't just engagement, it's fuel, momentum, and protection for this truth. Let's grow louder together. Ask yourself this. How many times did life try to convince you that you're nothing, and yet something in you refused to fully believe it? How many times did you feel like giving up, but some stubborn part of you just wouldn't let go? That part of you, that quiet, rebellious core, that's what they've been at war with all along. Not your body, not your bank account, your core. And now, here you are, after everything, still breathing, still listening, still searching. That alone makes you dangerous. But don't get it twisted. Surviving isn't the part that terrifies them. Evolving is. A chosen one who barely hangs on is a problem. A chosen one who realizes, wait, none of this was random. They were scared of me, becomes a nightmare they can't contain. My dear chosen ones, this message isn't here to comfort them. It's here to corner them. Every second you keep watching, their grip weakens. This isn't background noise. This is a wrecking ball to the story they wrote about you. Because once you remember that you were never the victim of a chaotic world, but the target of a calculated suppression, everything shifts. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start saying, "So that's why they came so hard." They will call this paranoia. They will say, "You're overthinking it. Everyone struggles." But look at your life. Really look. The intensity, the repetition, the way betrayal hit deeper, the way isolation felt heavier. That wasn't a script for just anyone. That was a strategic campaign to keep you exhausted, distracted, and doubting yourself long enough that you never woke up to what you carry. And yet, here you are, my dear chosen ones, listening to the very message they begged would never touch your timeline. This isn't an accident. This is their worst-case scenario playing out in real time. You awake. You aware. You no longer willing to shrink just to keep them comfortable. If you're still here, it's because something in you recognizes this. Not as hype, not as fantasy, but as the explanation you've been missing your whole life. And if you feel that fire in your chest right now, that quiet voice saying, "They really did try to break me for a reason," then understand that feeling is not weakness. It's your awakening stretching its limbs. This isn't just a video. This is the crack in the dam. This is the moment they prayed would never come. And my dear chosen ones, it's already too late for them, because now you see it. My dear chosen ones, before we go any deeper into what they never wanted you to uncover, I need you to stand with this message, not just watch it. Content like this doesn't survive unless those who resonate become protectors of it. If you feel that pull in your chest, if even a part of you senses that this was meant to reach you, then lock in with us. Hit like, subscribe, and comment 77 to show that you refuse to be silenced. Your support isn't about numbers, it's proof they failed to stop you. And now, stay close, because what comes next will explain exactly why your path has never looked like anyone else's. Number 1. The day they feared you would finally open your eyes. You were never meant to stay asleep, and they knew it. They don't fear your raw, chosen one. They fear the moment you realize you were born with one. My dear chosen ones, listen closely. If they ever wished you would stay silent, small, distracted, or numb, it wasn't because you were weak. It was because your awareness was their greatest threat. They built their comfort on the hope that you would never question, never analyze, never connect the dots. They didn't cross their fingers and hope you stayed asleep. They strategized for it. Because the moment you start noticing patterns, the moment you start asking why, the moment you stop blaming yourself and start recognizing the setup, that's the moment their quiet control begins to crumble. And I know what you might be thinking right now. Why me? Why was my journey filled with more chaos, more setbacks, more mental battles than everyone around me? Here's the hard-hitting answer they never wanted you to consider. Because someone like you, with your level of perception, clarity, empathy, resilience, and inner fire, could dismantle narratives without lifting a single weapon. You don't influence by force. You influence by presence. And people like that aren't ignored. They're monitored. My dear chosen one, imagine a matchstick. Alone on a table, it looks harmless, quiet, disposable, until someone realizes that one small spark can destroy an entire forest that was built on dry lies. They didn't fear your quiet phases. They feared the moment your quiet turned into understanding. You weren't underestimated. You were precautiously managed. They hoped you would drown in self-doubt before you ever learned how to swim through it. So they fed you thoughts like, maybe I'm overthinking, maybe I'm too emotional, maybe it's just bad luck, maybe there's nothing special about me. Meanwhile, every intense moment in your life was meant to confuse you, not because your path was cursed, but because clarity is a privilege they never wanted you to access. Think back. How many phases of your life felt heavier than they should have? How many times did you feel like you were fighting invisible battles while others were coasting effortlessly? That wasn't weakness. It was training. Some people are carried, but chosen ones are sharpened. They didn't try to physically overpower you. That would have exposed their agenda. Instead, they attacked the only battlefield that truly matters, your perception of yourself. If they could convince you that your gift was a flaw, your intuition was paranoia, your sensitivity was weakness, and your awareness was delusion, then they wouldn't need to stop you. You would stop yourself. But you didn't. You stumbled, you struggled, you doubted, you fell, but you never surrendered. And that's where their biggest miscalculation began. They assumed obstacles would turn you into a quitter, not a thinker. They believed pain would break you, not deepen you. They thought isolation would silence you, not awaken you. You weren't destroyed by the weight. You evolved under it. My dear chosen ones, understand this. The loudest victories are not the ones where crowds applaud, but the ones where you learn how to rebuild yourself in private. While others celebrated small wins, you survived heavy battles that no one ever saw. And that, right there, is what makes you dangerous, because your strength wasn't borrowed, handed down, or gifted. It was earned through scars. And now that you see through the performance, now that you can sense intentions without evidence, now that you recognize energy without explanations, they can no longer operate the same way with you. Awareness is not something that can be reversed. Once you notice the strings, you never again fear the puppets. Yes, they may whisper that you're too intense, too aware, too different, or too much. But let me tell you what those words actually translate to. We can't control someone like you anymore. My dear chosen ones, your awakening didn't happen in one moment. It happened through years of surviving what was meant to silence you. And now here you stand, not confused, but aware, not hopeless, but sharpened, not broken, but rebuilt. That's why you can never go back to who you were before. You're no longer operating on what you were told. You're operating on what you have lived, felt, observed, and understood. So let them worry. Let them scramble. Let them hope you forget again. Because the very moment they feared is already happening. You're awake, not accidentally, but inevitably. And now the question is not, why did they work so hard to dim my potential? The real question is, what happens next, now that their plan has failed? And trust me, my dear chosen ones, we are just getting started. Number 2, they couldn't steal your power, so they tried to turn it into your enemy. When they couldn't steal your power, they tried to turn you against it. They didn't need to take your strength, they just needed you to believe it was a flaw. My dear chosen ones, listen carefully, because this part hits where most of your battles were silently fought. When they realized they couldn't erase your natural strength, your rare mind, your unusual perception, your fire, or your presence, they switched strategies. They didn't try to destroy your power. They tried to convince you to destroy it on their behalf. They didn't need to lock you in chains. All they needed was to trick you into putting the cuffs on yourself. They whispered insecurity into your confidence, shame into your authenticity, doubt into your intuition, and guilt into your uniqueness. They hoped that by the time you grew old enough to understand who you were, you would already dislike yourself. Think back, chosen one. How early did the world start making you feel different? How many times did you hear phrases like, "You're too much," "You think too deep," "You care too much," you try too hard, you question everything, or why can't you just be normal? They repeated those phrases not because something was wrong with you, but because something was right with you. Painfully, obviously, threateningly right. They wanted to shrink you before you understood your full size. They didn't mock your intensity because it was a problem. They mocked it because it exposed the emptiness of theirs. They didn't criticize your thinking because it was flawed. They criticized it because they couldn't follow it. They didn't belittle your emotional depth because it was weak. They belittled it because numb minds will always fear a soul that can feel, understand, and heal. They didn't say you were too passionate to protect you. They said it to prevent you from discovering that passion is fuel, not a fault. The most threatening thing in the world is not someone who wants power. It's someone who already has it, but hasn't realized it yet. So they staged a psychological ambush. Instead of encouraging your talents, they dismissed them. Instead of acknowledging your insight, they rolled their eyes. Instead of celebrating your imagination, they called it unrealistic. They didn't want you to stop dreaming, just to believe that dreams were useless. They didn't need to block opportunities. They just needed you to believe you didn't deserve them. They didn't need to silence you. They just needed you to feel embarrassed for speaking. This was never accidental. The fastest way to disarm a gifted mind is by making it hate what makes it powerful. Chosen one, you were not too much. You were simply more than they could handle. You were not dramatic. You were emotionally intelligent. You were not overthinking. You were analyzing what others ignored. You were not weird. You were original. You were not hard to love. You simply required depth. You didn't struggle to fit in. You were never designed for environments built on similarity and repetition. The world doesn't ridicule the ordinary. It misunderstands the exceptional. Look at history, psychology, creativity, innovation. The people who changed the direction of society were almost always mocked first, doubted second, resisted third, and admired only after the world realized it needed them. Misunderstanding is often the earliest recognition of greatness. The same pattern played out in your life, not because you failed to blend in, but because blending in was never your destiny. And now here you stand, chosen one, not perfect, not fully healed, not fully certain, but finally aware. And awareness is the one thing they could never prepare for, because the moment you realize your sensitivity is perception, your passion is fuel, your depth is intelligence, your intensity is magnetism, and your uniqueness is rare, you become unstoppable. So here is the real question, the only one that matters right now. Will you continue shrinking to make others comfortable? Or will you finally expand into the person they prayed you'd never become? Because when a chosen one stops apologizing for their power, the room changes, the atmosphere shifts, the energy recalibrates, and the illusion collapses. They never feared your flaws. They feared your acceptance of your strengths. The moment you own them, their influence dissolves. And my dear chosen ones, you are standing at that exact moment right now. Number 3, the invisible blueprint designed to keep you mentally caged. They didn't need cages when they had your mind. They didn't hide the chains, chosen one. They hid the fact that you were wearing them. My dear chosen one, let's strip the illusion clean. They didn't ask you to kneel. They trained you to forget you were ever standing. They understood something from the very beginning. The strongest prison isn't built with metal or walls, but with unquestioned beliefs. When a person accepts limitation as normal, control becomes effortless. And that right there was their masterpiece. A system so polished, so normalized, so globally accepted that most people defend it without ever realizing they are part of its architecture. They didn't need to lock doors. All they had to do was lock perspectives. You were born into a world that handed you a script before you even learned to speak. A script that told you what success should look like, how life should unfold, what dreams were realistic, and which parts of yourself were too much. From childhood, you were trained to value permission more than originality. You were applauded for compliance, not curiosity. You were taught to memorize information, not question why it mattered. They didn't want free thinkers, they wanted well-behaved participants, silent enough to control, but busy enough to never rebel. And yes, my dear chosen one, you may wonder, why didn't I notice it earlier? How could I not see something so obvious? Because they never forced the system onto you, they disguised it as the only natural path. They painted confinement as safety, numbing as normal, and silence as maturity. They conditioned people to fear risk more than regret, and to fear failure more than a wasted life. They replaced inner guidance with outer validation and convinced entire generations that identity must be earned instead of discovered. Look around. There are people living an entire lifetime inside a pre-approved routine. School, limited career, cultural expectations, financial pressure, consumption, survival mode repeat, all wrapped in clever marketing that calls it freedom. They didn't hide the maze, they decorated it. They didn't eliminate individuality, they redirected it. They didn't remove potential, they boxed it as fantasy. And while the masses clapped for the illusion, only the chosen ones felt that silent discomfort beneath it, that unexplainable voice whispering, there has to be more than this. My dear chosen one, your confusion was never a weakness. It was the first sign of awakening. Notice something. People who fit perfectly into the system rarely question it. Only the ones who sense misalignment begin searching for truth. Only the ones who struggle with conformity begin remembering who they were before conditioning. Only the ones who feel different become the ones who eventually lead. They didn't want you to see that the real currency was never money, it was focus. They didn't want you to see that the real product was never education, it was behavior. They didn't want you to see that the real battlefield was never outside, it was internal narrative. When a mind is convinced it is powerless, no chains are required. That's why their greatest weapon was not force, but distraction. They didn't silence your potential. They buried it under noise. Why do you think entertainment is endless? Why do you think trends reset every week? Why do you think everyone feels rushed even when nothing is happening? Distraction is the easiest way to starve awareness. But chosen ones were built differently. You may have played along, but you never fully surrendered. Even when life blended into routine, your mind never did. Even when society handed you a definition, it didn't fit. Even when everyone else seemed content, you felt something misaligned, like your wings were folded inside a body that the world insisted should crawl. And that, my dear chosen one, is why you're here. Not because someone shared a video, not because of coincidence, but because you are standing at the exact border between illusion and clarity. A place not many reach, and even fewer survive, with their authenticity intact. Here's the part they never wanted spoken out loud. Once a chosen one learns how to observe instead of absorb, the spell breaks. The moment you question the script loses power. The moment you trust your inner voice over their manufactured noise, the tower they built begins to crack from the foundation. They always feared that one day someone like you would stop acting like a character and remember you were the author. You are not behind, lost, or confused. You are awakening. You are not late. You are right on time. And as your awareness expands, the system loses control one layer at a time. They can distract a crowd, but they can't blind someone who has learned how to see. And now, my dear chosen one, the vision is yours. And the illusion is theirs. Number 4. Your wounds weren't accidents, they were precision strikes. Your pain was a strategy, not an accident. My dear chosen one, there is a truth that hits harder than anything they ever taught you. Your pain was never random, and your suffering was never just part of life. It was calculated. It was placed. It was engineered with silent precision. You were never attacked because you were weak. You were attacked because you were becoming too powerful to control. The goal was never to make you lose. The goal was to make you believe you would never win. They didn't try to block your path because you were unworthy of one. They tried because they saw what you couldn't see. Your potential was a threat long before you recognized it. From the very beginning, they aimed at your mind, your confidence, and your ability to believe in your own voice. They knew they wouldn't have to chain your hands if they could successfully chain your thoughts. So they struck when you were young, when you didn't know how to filter intentions, when you didn't know how to translate energy, when you were still learning what to do with the fire inside you. They had to sabotage your identity before it became a weapon, because a chosen one with self-awareness is a force they cannot override. Look back, truly look back. Notice how the deepest wounds came not from strangers, but from people you trusted. They didn't only want to hurt you, they wanted to confuse your ability to trust your own heart. They used closeness as camouflage because betrayal delivered by love cuts deeper than any open attack. They created emotional earthquakes so you would be too busy surviving to question who set the explosives. They didn't just try to discourage you, they attempted to disconnect you from yourself. Think about how many times life knocked you down at the exact moment you were finally rising. Just when you thought you had found stability, someone shifted the ground beneath you. Just when you tried to build momentum, something came to slow your steps. Just when your faith in yourself was returning, someone or something added doubt, like poison dripping slowly, not enough to kill you suddenly, but just enough to weaken you silently. That's not coincidence. That's psychological warfare disguised as experience, my dear chosen one. They surrounded you with people who couldn't see your value on purpose. It wasn't accidental that you were placed among those who underestimated you, dismissed you, spoke over you, used you, or never believed in your vision. When a powerful mind is denied validation, it starts questioning itself. And that was their hidden objective. Not to defeat you physically, but to exhaust you mentally until you decided to stop fighting. Because if they could make you internalize powerlessness, they could retire from attacking. They wanted you to voluntarily shrink. But here is the twist they never calculated correctly. Chosen ones are not weakened by adversity. They are sculpted by it. Pressure didn't break you, it shaped you. Every setback sharpened your awareness. Every betrayal upgraded your discernment. Every loss removed what could not walk with your destiny. Every internal battle built a version of you that no external attack could ever defeat. The fire that was meant to destroy you became the furnace that reinforced your resilience. You didn't just survive it, you evolved through it. And now that you're awake, the patterns are no longer invisible. You can sense intention without evidence. You can hear lies even when spoken as compliments. You can feel energy that contradicts words. You are no longer fooled by smiles that don't match eyes. They didn't prepare for a version of you that can't be manipulated twice. They didn't expect you to analyze instead of react. So the question now is not, why did I suffer? The question is, what did that suffering activate in me? Because hidden inside every painful moment was a skill, a lesson, a weapon, a level of self-knowing that comfort could never have taught you. You became what they feared most, aware, intentional, self-directed, and unbreakable. That's why this moment is so dangerous for them. Now you see it all clearly. My dear chosen one, don't ever mistake scars as signs of defeat. Scars are evidence that you heal faster than they can destroy. Scars mean the attack failed. Scars mean the story isn't over. And now that you finally recognize the purpose behind the pain, you stand on the threshold of becoming everything they prayed you would never realize you could be. Now the only question left is this: will you keep dimming your power to make others comfortable, or will you rise and make them confront what they created? The answer determines everything. Number 5. The battle they fought was psychological, not physical. The war was invisible, but the scars were not. My dear chosen one, let this sink in. The battlefield you were thrown into was never visible, but the wounds you carry are as real as broken bones. You weren't just dealing with rude people, unlucky timing, or random chaos. You were navigating a psychological combat zone designed to keep you exhausted, doubtful, distracted, and disconnected from who you truly are. While others walked through life like it was a playground, you walked through it like a landmine field with no map, no warning, and no explanation. And still, here you are. They wanted you confused, not awakened. They wanted you drained, not dangerous. They wanted you busy questioning yourself, so you never questioned the system. You weren't fighting individuals. You were fighting an entire architecture of subtle sabotage. Think about how many times you were on the edge of transformation, and suddenly chaos showed up wearing a familiar face. The timing was never random. The disruption always came when you were closest to leveling up. Someone would start drama the moment you found peace. Doubt would creep in right when you gained clarity. Unexpected problems appeared precisely when motivation sparked. At first, you blamed yourself. You thought your standards were too high, your trust was too open, or maybe you just had bad luck. But chosen one, patterns don't lie. When the same storm follows the same person repeatedly, it's not weather. It's a target. They didn't fight you with open attacks. That would expose the game. They fought you through people who appeared harmless, supportive, or charismatic on the outside, but carried emotional extraction tools on the inside, people who drained your energy without displaying fangs. People who used your empathy as their fuel source. People who pretended to connect while actually collecting data on you. Not everyone who smiled at you wished for your growth. Some smiled because they saw potential value, not mutual evolution. Pay attention. Every time you started building momentum, a distraction appeared, not just socially, but mentally. You suddenly felt drained for no obvious reason. Ideas you were excited about suddenly felt heavy. Confidence turned into hesitation. Motivation turned into fatigue. This wasn't laziness. This was resistance engineered through repeated emotional overload. They didn't need to stop you physically. Slowing you down internally was enough. If your mind could be tangled, your power could be paused. And yes, my dear chosen one, you blamed yourself for the exhaustion. You thought, maybe I'm just overly sensitive, maybe I'm not trying hard enough, maybe I'm not built for big things. That inner voice didn't sound like an enemy. It sounded like you. But ask yourself, who taught you to speak to yourself like that? Who gave you those doubts? Where did that version of your voice come from? It wasn't born in you. It was installed through repetition, disappointment, subtle discouragement, comparison, emotional manipulation, and psychological conditioning. Think deeply for a moment. Why is it that every time you were just about to rise into a new chapter, something or someone attempted to pull you back into survival mode? Because people who are stuck surviving don't have the bandwidth to build, expand, question, or rebel. If you were kept busy healing old wounds, you would never discover the strength hidden underneath them. If you were kept trying to prove your worth, you would never realize you were already valuable without validation. They wanted you tired, not transformed. But here's the turning point they never predicted. You finally recognize the pattern. Once the chosen one becomes aware, nothing works the same way again. The tactics lose their power the moment you identify them. Confusion has been replaced with clarity. Exhaustion has been replaced with awareness. Self-blame has been replaced with self-recognition. You no longer see chaos as coincidence, you see it as an interruption strategy. And when the target understands why it was targeted, the power dynamics shift instantly. So now, my dear chosen one, you face a decision, not of fear but of identity. Will you continue operating like someone who is being drained, or will you finally operate like someone who deserves to conserve energy for greatness? Because once you take back control of your focus, your attention, your time, and your emotional bandwidth, the system loses its influence immediately. They cannot drain what you no longer supply. They cannot redirect what you consciously guard. They cannot manipulate what you see clearly. This chapter is not here to scare you. It is here to confirm you. The struggle was never proof of weakness. It was proof of value. The resistance was never accidental. It was a reaction to your potential. If you were insignificant, they would have left you alone. But they didn't, and that tells you everything. And now that you understand the hidden battlefield, my dear chosen one, prepare for the next move, because awareness is only the beginning. Number 6. When they couldn't break you, they tried to become you. They tried to become your shadow, but no shadow can replace its source. A copy can steal your moves, but it can never steal your origin. My dear chosen ones, there comes a phase in your journey where you realize imitation was never accidental. It was admiration wrapped in envy. At first, they pointed fingers, rolled their eyes, doubted your vision, and tried to convince you that your way of thinking didn't fit the world. They called you too much, too ahead, too different, or too intense, hoping that you would shrink yourself to match their comfort zone. They wanted you to believe that your originality was a flaw, not a weapon. But here's where things took an interesting turn. The moment they realized that all their attempts to break you failed, they switched strategies. They stopped trying to crush you and instead started trying to be you. Suddenly, the same people who once mocked your mindset started repeating your words. The same ones who dismissed your ideas began building their identity from your blueprint. The same ones who told you your dreams were unrealistic started chasing the same goals you once spoke about when nobody believed you. And you noticed it. Not because you were watching them, but because the universe made it too obvious to ignore. The tone changed. The energy changed. Their eyes changed. They didn't want to admit you were right. They wanted to harvest what made you right. But hear this loudly, chosen one. You cannot copy frequency. You cannot steal essence. You cannot download originality. Power is not a costume. It is a signature. You can study someone's actions, but you cannot mirror their inner wiring. Imitation may fool the crowd for a moment, but it can never dominate the arena where authenticity rules. A counterfeit product can shine like gold under certain lighting. But once the heat rises, the truth always reveals itself. Real power is not performative. It is felt even in silence. They never hated you because you were wrong. They hated you because deep down they sensed you were right before anyone else did. They never avoided you because you were unimportant. They avoided you because being near you highlighted what they lacked within themselves. You triggered something they couldn't explain, and instead of evolving within themselves, they tried to borrow your evolution and wear it like clothing. They wanted your results but not your resilience. They wanted your glow but not your growth. They wanted your confidence but not your scars. My dear chosen ones, think about it. If you were irrelevant, why were your ideas suddenly useful? If you were ordinary, why did they keep referencing your style, your language, your mindset, your path? If you were forgettable, why did they remember every detail long enough to reconstruct it? This is what they will never confess. You were never someone they overlooked. You were someone they could not decode. That is why, even after all the copying, all the mimicking, all the subtle identity theft, something still didn't work for them. They performed your steps, but not your spirit. They repeated your words, but not your wisdom. They replicated your moves, but not your motive. And the reason is simple. You cannot fake a journey you never walked. Your power wasn't built from inspiration. It was built from survival, reflection, alignment, pain, growth, and awakening. They saw the results, but never lived the construction. So let them copy, chosen one. Let them watch, let them study, let them rehearse. Because what is real does not compete. It simply shines until anything artificial evaporates. You are not threatened by imitation. Imitation is proof of your influence. When you step fully into who you were meant to become, they will no longer want to replace you. They will be forced to acknowledge you. And here's the final truth they prayed you would never realize. No one can replace a blueprint they don't have the password to. You are not here to fight for your spot. You are the spot. You don't chase identity. You embody it. You are not a trend. You are the reference point. And as long as you stay true to your own path, nothing and no one can remove you from what was always meant to be yours. Because yes, my dear chosen one, they can borrow your footsteps, but they will never walk your destiny. Number 7. Fear was their remote control until you pulled the batteries out. When fear stops working, their entire empire falls apart. My dear chosen ones, power built on fear is a sandcastle pretending to be stone. It only stands as long as no one dares to touch it. Fear has always been their silent weapon, the invisible leash, the unseen cage, the psychological trap designed to keep you compliant without ever lifting a finger. They never needed bars or padlocks. They never needed guards or prisons, because the most effective prison is the one a person carries inside their mind. As long as you were scared to act, scared to question, scared to stand alone, scared to outgrow the version of you they crafted, you were never going to challenge anything. They didn't want to overpower you. They wanted you to overpower yourself. Think about it, chosen one. You were never physically held back. No one tied your hands. No one chained your feet. No one stitched your mouth shut. But how many times did you hesitate? Not because you couldn't move, but because you were terrified of what would happen if you did. What if I fail? What if they laugh? What if I lose? What if I end up alone? These thoughts were not born in your mind. They were planted there, nurtured there, repeated until they became familiar enough to feel like truth. They knew that if fear became your advisor, they would never need to become your enemy. You would already be fighting yourself. Look back at every moment in history where systems fell apart, structures were exposed, and illusions shattered. It was never because an army showed up stronger. It was because individuals stopped being afraid. People didn't suddenly gain new powers. They simply stopped giving away the ones they already had. Fearlessness is not the absence of danger. It is the refusal to let intimidation make decisions on your behalf. That is why the strongest forces in existence have never been those with the biggest weapons, but those with the deepest conviction. It was never muscle that changed reality. It was courage. My dear chosen ones, they wanted you trapped in what-if thinking, locked in hesitation, addicted to overthinking. They wanted you to mistrust your intuition, second-guess your abilities, and believe that your dreams were unrealistic fantasies instead of possible futures. Fear was never meant to protect you. It was meant to distract you. As long as you kept doubting yourself, you wouldn't take risks. And if you didn't take risks, you would never evolve. To them, your self-doubt was cheaper, easier, and far more efficient than confrontation. Why fight the chosen one when you can convince the chosen one to never step onto the battlefield? But here's the truth they are terrified of. Fear has an expiration date, and it ends the exact moment you realize they cannot take anything from you that you are no longer afraid to lose. When you stop fearing judgment, you stop shrinking. When you stop fearing mistakes, you start learning. When you stop fearing change, you start evolving. When you stop fearing them, you start winning. Their control was never real. It was psychological theater, a performance that only works if you remain an audience member instead of stepping onto the stage as the director. Take a moment and ask yourself, how many decisions did you not make because of fear? How many opportunities did you talk yourself out of? How many times did you silence yourself to avoid conflict? How many dreams were delayed, not because they were impossible, but because you were conditioned to believe the worst outcome before you even tried? They never feared your failure. They feared the day you no longer hesitated to try. Failure doesn't destroy chosen ones. Stagnation does. And the moment you stop letting fear set your limits, their influence dissolves like smoke in daylight. Look closely at those who try to intimidate, manipulate, or psychologically corner others. If they truly held real power, they wouldn't need fear. They use fear because that is their only leverage. A lion does not roar to scare other lions. It roars to silence what should never challenge it. When someone relies on fear tactics, it exposes their weakness, not their superiority. They need you to feel powerless because deep down, they know you're not. And if you ever matched your actions with your potential, their illusion would collapse faster than they can rebuild. My dear chosen ones, the moment you realize fear is not a wall but a shadow, you become untouchable. Shadows only look large when you stand far away. Step closer, and they shrink. Walk through them, and they disappear. Fear only controls those who have not questioned it. You are not here to tiptoe through life, hoping to avoid discomfort. You are here to step into your own magnitude, and once you do, the world will no longer intimidate you. So the real question is no longer, what if something goes wrong? The real question becomes, what if what's waiting for me goes right? And now, my dear chosen ones, the moment they feared is arriving. You are becoming someone fear can no longer negotiate with. Number 8. Your awakening is the earthquake that shakes their entire structure. When you rise, their illusion collapses. They never feared your existence. They feared the day you finally stood up and stopped apologizing for it. My dear chosen ones, pay close attention. Every time you grow, elevate, or evolve, someone somewhere feels the ground shift beneath them. Not because you harmed them, not because you attacked, not because you chased status or validation, but because your rise alone reveals the truth they fought to bury. Your awakening shines a spotlight on the lies they built their comfort on, and no illusion can survive light forever. You were never just another person passing through life. You were the quiet earthquake they hoped would never rumble. They didn't work overtime to silence you because you were ordinary. They did it because your potential was a direct threat to everything they carefully constructed. From the very beginning, they sensed something in you that you couldn't see yet. A clarity waiting to unfold, a resilience that refused to die, a rare internal compass that couldn't be bribed, broken, or borrowed. They noticed your ability to read energy before you could read intentions. They noticed how you questioned things others blindly accepted. They noticed how your presence alone shifted the room even when you said nothing. That is why they acted before you even understood what made you different. They wanted to shape your identity while it was still forming, because they were terrified of what you would become once you learned how to shape it yourself. So they did not confront you openly. They engineered confusion. They whispered doubts into the corners of your mind, hoping your confidence would evaporate. They planted people who would insult you in disguised compliments. They surrounded you with noise, distraction, and emotional weight so heavy that you barely had time to breathe, let alone discover your strength. They wanted you exhausted, not enlightened. They wanted you overwhelmed, not observant. They wanted you to chase survival, not purpose. But something they never calculated was your endurance. You didn't break, you built. You didn't collapse, you confronted. You didn't fade away, you recalibrated. Every setback became instruction. Every disappointment became data. Every betrayal taught you how to protect your energy. And each time you got back up, you returned stronger, sharper, and more aware. The very pain that was meant to quiet you ended up preparing you. The process they designed to shrink you instead expanded you. They tried to dim you, but you learned how to glow without permission. My dear chosen ones, understand this. When someone designed to remain small suddenly expands, it disrupts the balance of any space built on control. That is why, when you finally start stepping into your truth, resistance increases. People who once ignored you suddenly watch you. Those who once felt superior start feeling threatened. Those who once manipulated you panic when they can no longer predict you. This is not coincidence. This is confirmation. Your rise exposes those who relied on your silence. You see, illusion only thrives when no one questions it. The moment one person does, the spell weakens for everyone watching. That is why your awakening is not just personal, it is catalytic. Others observe your transformation and begin questioning their own limitations. Your courage becomes contagious. Your clarity becomes reference material. Your evolution becomes evidence that they can evolve too. That is what they truly feared. Not your voice alone, but the chain reaction it could inspire. Remember this, they didn't respect your silence. They depended on it. Because as long as you were unsure, they felt secure. As long as you doubted yourself, they could move freely. As long as you played small, they could play superior. But now that you are rising, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer inside the maze, you are observing it. And once someone sees the maze from above, they can no longer be controlled by the puzzle inside it. My dear chosen ones, your rise is not loud, it is undeniable. It doesn't need approval, applause, or permission. Your evolution is the quiet victory they never prepared for. This isn't about winning against them. It's about no longer being contained by them. When you operate from awareness instead of fear, external influence loses its grip. This is why, from this moment forward, your presence alone carries impact. You don't need to force change. You are the change. So the real question is no longer, will you rise? The real question is, are you ready for who you become once you stop shrinking? Because now, chosen one, every step you take forward is a reminder that their era of control is over, and yours has already begun. Number 9. You were never built for the crowd. You were engineered for the front line. You were never built for the crowd. You were designed for the front line. My dear chosen ones, listen carefully. The reason you never blended in was never because something was wrong with you. It was because something powerful was right within you. While others were molded to match their surroundings, you were wired to stand out, even when you tried your hardest to shrink. You weren't born to be accepted. You were born to be recognized. And there's a massive difference. Acceptance means you fit the mold. Recognition means you break it. And deep down, you've always felt it. That strange sense of separation, like you were present, but never fully belonging in any environment they tried to place you in. You felt it in childhood, when others seemed to connect effortlessly while you stood on the edges, observing more than participating. You felt it in friendships, when you sensed truths others ignored, when you saw through behaviors that others excused, when you spoke with depth in a world obsessed with noise. You felt it in relationships, when your emotions ran deeper than those who preferred surface-level bonding. and you felt it in society when everything around you pushed you to comply, but your inner voice demanded that you question, challenge, explore, and evolve. They made you believe that standing apart meant being flawed, but it was your first sign of leadership. My dear chosen ones, isolation has always been the training ground of those who eventually shift reality. While others learn from comfort, you learned from emptiness, silence, misjudgment, and distance. While the average soul looks for a crowd to follow, the chosen ones develop their vision alone. Because influence is born where noise cannot interfere. You were not excluded. You were extracted, taken away from what would have diluted your potential, separated from what couldn't match your frequency, placed where you could hear your own thoughts loudly enough to grow. You were never meant to be understood by everyone. Leaders, innovators, thinkers, creators, and world shifters rarely are. People fear what they cannot predict, and they resist what they cannot control. That is why your difference made others uncomfortable. That is why people tried to minimize you, not because you lacked value, but because they sensed a level of direction inside you that they didn't know how to handle. When people cannot label you, they try to limit you. When they cannot match your energy, they try to question it. When they cannot keep up, they try to slow you down. But chosen ones, remember this: a lion doesn't need the approval of sheep to roar. Your path was never supposed to be about fitting into their blueprint. It was about designing your own. You were not made for small talk, groupthink, or predictable routes. You were shaped for critical thinking, elevated vision, and strategic movement. There is a reason your intuition never allowed you to fully settle into ordinary comfort zones. There is a reason average never felt enough. There is a reason your mind kept reaching for something more. That was purpose refusing to let you retire into convenience. So stop chasing validation from those who have never traveled the road you're walking. Stop apologizing for depth in a shallow culture. Stop treating your difference like a disadvantage. Stop wishing to be understood by people who haven't even understood themselves. Your path is not a popularity contest. It's a legacy formation. And legacy is not built in crowds. It is built in moments of clarity, isolation, fearless decisions, and inner evolution. The time has come, my dear chosen ones, to step into your natural position, not behind, not beside, but ahead. Lead through awareness, lead through authenticity, lead through self-mastery. Because the moment you embrace who you are without dilution, everything begins to align. Opportunities, connections, momentum, vision, energy, and purpose. And the very people who once questioned your difference will eventually trace your footsteps, not because they believed in you at first, but because your results will demand their attention. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to stand where others were too afraid to stand. And the world is entering a time where genuine leaders are not only needed, but unavoidable. So remember this: if you ever felt alone, it wasn't abandonment, it was positioning. And if you ever felt misunderstood, it wasn't failure, it was identity. You were not born to join a line. You were born to create one. And now, my dear chosen ones, take a deep breath and let everything settle. Not in your mind, but in your identity. You didn't find this message by coincidence. You arrived here because it was time to remember who you truly are and what they hoped you would never realize. If this awakened something inside you, don't let it end here. Lock in with us. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, drop 77 in the comments to confirm your rise, and share this message so it reaches the ones still fighting in silence. Your voice strengthens the mission.